So after an exciting morning, we will now look at the second issue which we have identified for today's discussion on productivity prospects, and it's the issue of business dynamism. We have heard already that declining business dynamism is one of the reasons for the productivity slowdown, and there might be various factors behind that. In the post-crisis environment, it was more the tight credit conditions and the balance sheets of companies. Now we've heard funding is not so much of a problem. There are other issues. Competition especially has been identified in the early discussion. I think we will start with technology, because that came up as the puzzle number one, probably, namely why isn't technology, with all its revolutionary repercussions, why isn't it translating into productivity improvements? And we will want to examine whether it's the question of time lags between introduction of innovations and productivity effects, or whether it's market imperfections and inability to reallocate resources within firms and between firms. So I'm delighted to welcome in this stellar panel Iliyana Tsanova, who is Deputy Managing Director of the European Fund for Strategic Investments, based at the European Investment Bank. Prior to joining EFSI, Iliyana spent 12 years at EBRD in London and in different board positions with utility companies and infrastructure funds. She had also been Deputy Prime Minister of Bulgaria in two caretaker governments. Eric Bartelsman, General Director, Tinbergen Institute and Professor of Economics at Vrije University in Amsterdam. In the past, also a research fellow at the European Central Bank and a member of the Netherlands Council of Economic Advisors. Warm welcome. Stan Boland, who is co-founder and CEO of FiveAI, a major startup developing autonomous vehicle technology for cities, and previously founder of some of the UK's most successful venture-backed software companies. So warm welcome. I'm also delighted to welcome my colleague Veronica Tovsak-Pleterski, who is Director for Structural Reform and Competitiveness at DG ECFIN, and who will kindly do what Roman did in the previous panel, namely she will offer policy takeaways for us once we are through the discussion. And we will also have one my story to make sure that we remain linked up to the real world. And Katya, who is CEO of DataStories, will take us through her experience in a moment. But first, I would like to start with Eric, because you look at the trends in the technology world in the broader way, and if you could tell us what is your take on what is happening with respect to impact on productivity. Again, you can speak from there or from here, up to you. Yeah, please.
Better contact the audience too. I can't really see the audience from there. All right. Well, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this, what I think is an extremely important meeting today. I just finished a draft that I did up under the auspices of DG ECFIN. It'll be a working paper on their website soon, and it's called From New Technology to Productivity. I've kind of been a techno-optimist my whole life. I love my new gadgets. I love the new things that can be done. Anything innovative and that gets me going, I'm that type of person. Yet, I've been calling now for the last 15 years for productivity growth to double and to have a doubling in well-being in society within 30 years. Well, if I started that 15 years ago, we better have 4.5% productivity growth for the next 15 if we want to make that. So I've been tempering my optimism, but basically I think I've been coming to the conclusion that these new technologies have features that are actually changing the marketplace and the way the economy runs in a way that is holding back the process of diffusion and the process of dynamism that leads to productivity. So that's really what I want to be the takeaway, is that the technology itself has characteristics that, given the current regulatory and legal environments in the various countries of the advanced world economies, is such that those regulations, whatever they were, no longer suffice, and that these technological characteristics are really changing us in a certain direction. So let me try to make that clear. We all know what these technologies are, but I think it's important to think about them. The autonomous vehicles take place of a lot of labor. So Osborne and Fry, but also others, have just counted what are the tasks that people do, and depending on whose numbers you believe, about 15 to 30 or 40% of our tasks will be replaced by these machines. The same with robot technology. But along the way, especially in the last 6-7 years, the role of data that's been collected throughout everything we do all day long, that data, together with methodologies of machine learning to analyze that data, is generating possibilities to deliver services that are better than the competitor can deliver if they don't have access to that data. Okay, and I think this type of dynamics of collecting the data, generating an amount of assets, namely these data that can be used further on in production, is generating the dynamics of firms. So we've seen before why the dynamism is important. I like to think of it as very simple. Productivity is the change in well-being minus the change in effort to get it. So if you don't have to change your effort at all, and you get more stuff and more good feelings and more free time, whatever it is that you get more of without putting in the effort, that's productivity growth. It's marvelous. You really would like that to double every 30 years. What do you need to get firms to deliver that? Well, you need carrots and sticks. The carrot is, here's someone putting in effort, because you got to put in the effort first before you get all this good stuff. Putting in the effort in the hope of getting some rather large return later. I like to think of it as lottery tickets as well. And the lower the probability and the higher the payoff, the more we want to do this as society, because what you do with reallocation is you take the winner and you go with it, and you chop off the losers. So dynamically, the bigger risks you take, the more advanced you get if you're able to shift the resources to the winners. It's like counting cards in the casino. If you play 21 and count cards, you put up more money when the odds are in your favor. You pull it back when it's against you. Even if the mean return is negative, you still walk away with a bundle. And then there's the stick. If you don't do this, your competitor's going to have your lunch. Okay, so not only do you want to see the carrot, you see the stick, and both those have been doing very well in the last 150, 250 years and moving us forward. Now, however, firms with their data advantages and these assets, together with the AI to mine it, are able to build competitive walls, possibly. So this is a hypothesis. I don't think any of us has this clearly taken, but there are reasons in these markets that there's winner take all. If there's a surgeon that uses mechanical means, so I call it a surgeon, but it's an AI that's gone through data and learned how to do stuff, and it's better than the competitor, who would go to the competitor if it's a full intangible? In other words, if it can scale out and you can do 100 surgeries a day or 1,000 with this technology, you'll never go to the second best. Well, this holds in many of these areas. Ride sharing, you would go to the one that better meets your needs. In other words, the one that is where you need the passenger pick up faster. I see a little thing flashing 0.
Give you additional.
Okay. So really the idea is that the technology that's coming forward is changing our way of economically analyzing this, that its biggest change is the role of data, and that we really need going forward to think about data ownership, think about markets, think about market platforms, think about intellectual property rights in a very new and dynamic way to keep pace with the changes in these technologies.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. You pointed us in new directions with your final comment on data ownership issues. There is, I think, increasingly prolific discussion about the types of models which we might want to have. Now I would like to invite Stan to take us through the experience of someone who is, again, doing things in this rapidly developing field of autonomous driving.
Thanks so much. Hi, good morning, everybody. So I've got a few slides I was going to use to just describe a bit about the landscape and what we're doing. So are they working, the slides? They're just coming. Just 1 second. So, yeah, so just to set some sort of overall framework for the kind of technology that we're building, we're kind of addressing, it's a massive market. So something like 13% of expenditure here in Europe is spent on personal mobility. So it's about €1 trillion per annum that we spend. It's colossal. And the vast majority of that, 80% of it, is basically spent on personal cars and operating those cars. And in fact, 75% of us live in cities. So we're actually spending a vast amount of money on buying and operating cars in cities is the fundamental problem. And not surprisingly, we can't get across those cities. And seat occupancy in those cars is roughly 1.2 per European city per journey. So that means seat utilization, given that we only use the car about 4 or 5% of the day, is about 1%. And I mean, which is absolutely crazy. Yeah, we're importing materials and fuel, pressing metal, building batteries, then putting them on a driveway to rot for 20 years. And then when we get in the car, we just can't get across the city. And then when we use it, we pollute. So it's completely nuts. So that's kind of what we're going to try and address. Can you just flip to the next slide? I've got control here. Okay. Okay. So it's obviously a massive market. That massive market is getting reflected in the valuations of some of the larger US competitors. So self-driving, if we're going to be utterly honest, has been a US phenomenon, really, forged by DARPA spending in the mid-2000s, and that teams with maybe 10 or 15 years experience have grouped together, raised venture capital and then mega venture, in some cases have been quasi-acquired by large car companies like GM and Ford, and have accumulated sufficient capital and sufficient people to have a good prospect of punching all the way through. So roughly 20 to 30 billion has been invested in the US on self-driving. The biggest of which is Waymo, Google's Waymo. Having said that, no services are yet launched in the US where, as a consumer, you can jump in a car, pay a fare, and get carried across the city. That was meant to happen in Phoenix, Arizona last December. It's still not happened, and part of the reason for that is this is a very, very complex problem, and it's going to need a lot of intelligence to fix it. Something similar is happening in China. So in China, Baidu is probably the biggest player in self-driving, but there's 3 other companies that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars of capital, already getting valued at something like $2 billion per company. And over the last 18 months, there's been a very definite shift to the right in the dates in which people expect this stuff to be ready, and that's increased the size of the investment it's going to take. And so what's happened in the last year is survival capital has gone into those businesses in the US that have got critical mass, and other companies are going to go bust. So there's going to be serious, there already has been consolidation in the US, there's going to be more. And the question really is what happens in Europe. I mean, the European market is almost as big as the US market, and we have been asleep at the wheel. And there is even now a sort of unconvincing approach to how we're going to solve this problem. But amazingly, Europeans dominate the sciences for the technology here. If you look at machine learning and computer vision, and you look at the citations of fundamental science work and where are those people from, it turns out the vast majority are Europeans. It's a surprise. They're not all in Europe, by the way. Some have actually gone to Canada or the US, but a large number of them are here, actually. And it is quite incredible, actually, the depth of science expertise that we have and the extent to which papers that we publish are seen as seminal in this space. You look at who's built self-driving car companies, they're almost all American. So it's a classic case of European technology brilliance and American entrepreneurialism. And that's the problem we've got to solve, basically. And we would say, look, okay, until now, let's put together a team of people that are able to configure. We can configure into a serious company here, put some capital behind it. It would be absolutely nuts for us not to build a business here that configures our talent across our market and delivers the economic value add here. It'd be absolutely nuts. And that's really what we've got to get our heads around, is how we do that. Oh, there is music here. You couldn't switch that music down, could you? I didn't mean to put the music on there. So what are we doing? So we're a sort of large-ish startup. We've raised something like $50 million in capital so far. So majority of that is venture capital. We did get a grant, actually turns out to be from the UK government, of $15 million, which is the biggest single grant check they've written in this space. And we've grown a team to about 150 people at this point. In startup land, that actually seems quite large at this sort of phase of the company. In the self-driving space, it's tiny. We are really at the very foothills of kind of building the solution to this problem. There is a kind of huge challenge ahead of us. But anyway, we're 32% of the staff that we've got are PhDs in relevant sciences, really drawn from Europe's top schools. Certainly includes TU Munich and ETH and INRIA, Bologna, as well as our biggest school is probably Cambridge, then Oxford, Edinburgh, London, Imperial and UCL. So we've been able to pull people from Europe's top schools. And the team that we've put together have built large companies in the past. I mean, large-ish. So I've sort of built 2 or 3 semiconductor companies that we've sold to Broadcom and NVIDIA for over $1 billion, so in deep tech space. This is easily the most complex problem that I've sort of picked up and tried to run with. And so we're building a full runtime stack, which means all the software that goes on the vehicle that takes all the decisions as to what's in the world and what's going to happen next and what actions are we going to take. And we're doing testing on public roads, which we've been doing for about a year now, actually in London. So I realise actually all these words are at the bottom here, and you probably can't see them actually. What's needed, I think, is we definitely need long-term capital. There is no Sequoia capital here in Europe with an $8 billion fund that's going to write a $500 million check into a bunch of people that haven't done it before. That it just doesn't exist, and so we're going to have to synthesize something that replaces it. So that's definitely a challenge for these kind of big deep tech plays. And we definitely need informed and faster regulation. So it'd be easy to have uninformed regulation, which would be a nightmare. And it would be easier to have fast regulation that was just completely wrong. But somehow we've got to get experts into regulatory world. We should be setting very high standards here in Europe and then making sure we meet them and then using that as a barrier to keep American and Chinese companies out. Our job is to build a business here that services the requirements of our cities with our people and creates the economic value add here and creates the skills here, not to allow ding-dong cars of Shenzhen to come in and run our cities for us, or even Google to do that and cream the profits off in an offshore tax haven and not pay any taxes. So it's very, very important, I think, that we get our act together and do this here in Europe. And if we do that, we're going to get, I think, a much-deserved payback on the science skills that we have here, and it's kind of incumbent on us to achieve that, really. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stan, also for the right level of ambition in saying that we would be nuts if we didn't want to take our share of the value that is created. When you say informed regulation, if you could just tell us, have you had interactions on this with the UK government, with the European Commission, or is it still to come?
We've had. Is that working? No. We've had. There you go. We've had some discussion with regulators. We're a small company, obviously. The UK, for example, I know it's only one of the countries in Europe, but the UK has kicked off a process with a group called the Law Commission, and the Law Commission is trying to work out what regulation should look like, and they are genuinely listening, and we're trying to basically get the right level of regulation there. We're arguing for expertise in regulation rather than self-regulation. I think if we go to Volkswagen testing their own diesel emissions, that would be a mistake, particularly when public safety is a concern here. So I think it's very, very important that we've got expertise in the regulatory environment that we've got. So we definitely argue for that. But there is a completely different process happening at a European level that the UK is kind of trying to play into, but not really playing a very big role. And there, I think there's a much more of a kind of set of vested interests of the German car industry to try to drive regulatory standards that are more about self-regulation. And that might be a mistake. So getting that right is a work in progress, I think.
Thank you so much. Now, Iliyana, there was an open invitation for you to comment already in the previous introductions, given the comment that Stan has just made about funding. And Roman earlier put the emphasis on the fact that we now have the European Innovation Council, which is doing great work with startups. But when it comes to projects that have bigger scale, do we have already something in place for breakthrough innovation, or is it one of these gaps that we will need to fill? Iliyana.
Good afternoon. I think it's afternoon now. First of all, before I get into what I'm about to say, I want to congratulate you for being such a wonderful master of ceremony the whole morning. He's been working very hard. I'm very happy to have heard the presentation of Arthur and Stan, because they're the best evidence that what I'm about to say now is actually true. And I wanted to start with a few facts. And the first fact is that Europe has the fundamental building block to become a global innovation leader. We have a very strong academic base. We have some of the best research institutions in the world. We have a very skilled workforce. We are leaders in certain industry globally, like robotics, manufacturing, healthcare, finance. However, it is obvious that we somehow managed to fail to fully capture, or we didn't succeed entirely to capture the benefit of Industry 4 technologies. And we can see that we are very good in establishing startups, but we are failing spectacularly in scaling them up. And what happens is that the startups that actually make it, they very often move their businesses outside Europe. And I think the reasons that somehow explain this trend, I call it the 3 Fs. I like that because it's easier to summarize. The first F, that's funding. The second F, that's fragmentation. And the third F is the frame of mind. Let's start with funding. It's absolutely important to foster innovation and to scale up businesses. But what we observe in Europe, that our risk capital markets still lack critical mass, and they still remain rather small and fragmented. And where we actually face two important gaps, and we've seen that from Arthur's presentation earlier this morning, this is at the stage where great ideas need the backing to be commercialized. This is when we need long-term capital. We call it patient capital, which unfortunately we lack in Europe. And by the way, the European Innovation Council is exactly the instrument that is going to tackle this challenge. That's going to be the first pan-European, large-scale, 10 billion patient capital fund that will start operating possibly with the next MFF. There are a few pilot phases already in place. By the way, in the US, they invest 9 times more in early-stage investment than what we do in EU. Then, if you pass that stage, you're faced with the second trap, where you need to really scale up, internationalize. And this is where you need bigger tickets. I think 7.5 million to going to 15 million. And in some industries, you actually need even bigger tickets. And this is where we actually have a huge gap, because again, the smaller scale of our VCs, and there are other reasons, talking about fragmentation do not allow us to tackle that. And the third issue, we also lack the big tech giants that are funding innovation globally, especially in the US and China. And what we see more and more today is that innovation is generated, it's coming out of the private industry rather than universities. So we have to think in mind when we talk about also adapting educational policies and how we cooperate with those giants. Few words about fragmentation. I mean, talking about scaling up markets, we have to talk about reducing fragmentation. And we don't know, I mean, EU is a union of 28 member states. You have different languages, different taxes, different regulations. Everything is completely different from country to country. And this clearly hampers, and we see that from our operations, cross-border expansion and cross-border investment. And if anything, this is something EU should definitely tackle as a matter of urgency. And the frame of mind, I mean, what I mean here, it's our attitude, European attitude towards risk-taking. And what we observe today is that established European corporations, public institutions, they're afraid of buying new technologies from startup companies, and they often go for established logos. And even the public procurement procedures that we see are not conducive for startup to actually even have a try. And I think we have to really change this frame of mind. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think we have to realize the mutual benefit for the established companies and the startups to actually cooperate together. That being said, I think we, as I said, we have the fundamental blocks to change that, and we have to build on our own strengths. And there are some success stories that we have seen in the last 4 years, like the fund I work for, the European Fund for Strategic Investments. I think through this initiative, it's a public guarantee of 26 billion, coupled with a guarantee from the European Investment Bank. We have managed to really transform innovation finance in Europe in two ways. First, by scaling up massively the activities of the European Investment Fund, which has an important catalytic function in the VC world, in the private equity. And second, by supporting through European Investment Bank breakthrough innovation and R&D developments with corporates, European corporates, mid-sized companies. We have developed new products like venture debt, which were not sufficiently offered on the European market. And InvestEU, which is the successor of EFSI, will more or less continue that trend, basically using public finance to crowd in and catalyze investment with the private sector. Talking about regulation, I'm not an expert on that field, but I think we have to give credit to European Union for championing some of the most progressive legislation in terms of data, the famous GDPR. We're now talking about ethical standards with artificial intelligence, again, setting a global standard on something which goes hand in hand with technology, and this is trust. Because more and more, we are concerned about that aspect of using technology. After the case of Cambridge Analytica, I think we realized also the danger of not having the right ethical standards in place. And public finance will remain an important funding source for investments, basic research, blending grants with instruments. We are now preparing, on top of European Investment Council, an instrument called Escalar, which will tackle exactly the gap where we need to scale up funds. The pilot phase will be probably launched in September through European Investment Fund. We want to increase the firepower of few existing scale-up growth capital funds, make them bigger, make them more diversified, being able to offer bigger tickets to European, not only European, but to innovative companies. I'll stop here. Thank you very much, and look forward to interesting discussion.
Iliyana, thank you so much for these reassuring messages that we are filling the gaps which exist and identifying them, I think, fairly well. Maybe I would have a follow-up question to you to start with respect to the available pools of resources that we have in Europe, and one obvious such a pool has to do with pension funds. We have we have sizable pension funds which don't invest much in VC projects. I think in the Nordic countries it is 13%, and that's the best performance in Europe. So when we think about doing more for scale-ups, do you think an instrument that could help leverage resources of the pension funds could be an interesting avenue? For example, doing the first loss guarantee for VC investment by pension funds. Would that be one of the avenues, one of the directions of travel in the future?
Yes, definitely that's one of the possibilities to attract more institutional funding into venture capital. But I think we have to also note the fact that we need capital markets union to allow for much bigger attraction of institutional money. And we have the strategy in place, but it's still, it's not there. We still need to really work on unifying the standards, making the necessary legislative changes in order to have a true capital markets union. And then there comes the step about understanding the venture capital as an asset class, which is another important development. And I think we still have venture capitalists that are traditional, that don't necessarily specialize in new technology and innovation. And I think you guys, you could discuss this better than me. But one of the challenges we have is that many of the venture capitalists do not really understand all the technological aspects when we talk about breakthrough innovation. And I think we also need to have a very reliable fund management in order to be able to attract large-scale funding from institutional investors.
I would also welcome Eric's or Stan's comment on this if you have thoughts, and I also welcome questions from the floor right away.
Yeah, so I think in the last 9 months, I think I've presented to 93 institutions across the globe in terms of funding the business, ranging from £1 trillion UK pension funds to venture capital firms. So there is some sort of recent experience of doing that, Rao, and it's absolutely clear, exactly as you say, that there's just no expertise in those big funds to even have a conversation. There is just no connection between the market, the approach we're taking, why it's going to work, really getting it and wanting to back it with enthusiasm. It's don't know how to evaluate it. So we somehow got to basically, as you say, bring experts in. There's no point in compelling pension funds to invest if they've no idea what they're going to invest in. I do think the crowding in strategy, though, is a very, very good one, and I think will prove to be very successful if we can get it to work, actually.
No, so the funding, of course, is an issue, and I guess for the firms putting their money in, they want to know, what does this lead to? What is the carrot? And so one option is, well, you're investing in Waymo and these others in the hope that the market valuation will pay off when you get a monopolist that rakes in everything. And that's not really an outcome that we all want, because we want urban transportation where people can seamlessly go from one point to the other at the lowest price. The other option, and you mentioned it before, is you put the money in the hope that 2 or 3 years down the line, maybe 5 years down the line, you're bought by NVIDIA or Broadcom. And that's also really not what we want, because NVIDIA and Broadcom are probably doing that to make sure that there's no potential competitors to the markets that they're collecting the rents on. And I think that this is kind of fundamentally saying we need to change kind of our thoughts of why are we investing money in this. We're not investing this money to create some next billionaire. We're investing money because society needs urban transportation at low emissions, at low costs, with less congestion. Okay, but I think we need to think about how do you get, and this is especially for the policymakers, less for the technologists, but I actually see policymakers and social scientists as technologists in this. How do you create the social and business environment that generates the ability for an ecosystem that allows this technology to thrive? And I think the model of thinking that the end game is a monopoly is just not the right one to go.
Yes, that's the idea also behind the missions that were mentioned earlier in Horizon Europe, namely what are the big societal challenges and how can we channel innovation in the right direction, so to say. Can I ask you also about the talent issue, because you both, I mean, Stan, you spoke about the staff you have, and Artur showed us a very capable international team working for his firm. But there is that obvious issue of how share options are treated from the tax perspective in Europe. And I mean, how much of a drain does that pose on your talent pool, on the talent pool of other companies, and how strong the expectation would be that something is done about it? Because it is a national competence, taxation. But we see very different approaches across European countries, and some of these are inhibitive, because unlike in the Silicon Valley, you are charged the tax first before you get the compensation. So that's not necessarily an incentive to come and work in Europe, and it does. I mean, the evidence shows it does disincentivize talented people from staying here.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely an issue for member states to sort out, because there's definitely nothing at a European level that stops member states putting in tax regimes that are highly attractive. So in the UK, for example, we issue what are called EMI options to all staff. That allows them to fall into a safe harbour, which means that we can actually issue options. Typically, today we're issuing options at 5 cents a share, and we've just raised capital at $9 a share, and there's no tax paid up front on any of that. They vest over a 4-year period, and if and when people exercise those shares and make a capital gain, that gain is in a safe harbour of 10% tax rate. That's it. So that is, that could easily be replicated by other member states and just works, and is actually more attractive than the US. So I don't really see that as being a huge problem. It's not. It's a necessary hygiene condition rather than a fundamental challenge that we've got, I think.
Will there be questions from the floor at this stage? I'm watching questions coming on Slido, so we'll pick up on those shortly. But as you are thinking, maybe one issue that you have raised again is that of regulation. And with the specific example of artificial intelligence, where I think there is a clear case for a better and more comprehensive regulatory regime, given that the existing one doesn't cover all dimensions of AI. Would a better approach be to have a horizontal take in which you ensure that the ethical guidelines are implemented, or is it better to go sector by sector?
I mean, at this point, I don't think the sector means much. I mean, here we have technologies that are changing sectors, that are maybe if you go back to human needs, housing, clothing, and et cetera. But I don't think you want to say machine tools and restaurant businesses. So in that sense, sector is the wrong level. The hard part is these technologies are evolving rapidly, and we've heard it before with policy that's more adaptive. In medical care, in the things going on with CRISPR technology, in the AI, the technology is moving way faster than even the ethicists can keep up, let alone the policymakers who listen to the ethicists to figure out what's going on. And I think this is just a conundrum we're in, and we better come up with one, hoping that the individual researchers and the companies doing this have a good basis in their head of what they should and should not be doing, and when they should be going to talk to an ethicist. But also we need to get priority and competency in government to quickly deal with this.
Yeah, and it's hard, I think, for governments to do this, really, because they just can't pay high salaries. So they typically employ people at low salaries, and so it really is it's just a gift that people are giving to society to stand in and do those regulatory jobs if they're high-functioning adults that could actually go and get a job with a sort of high-tech company and actually do the work. So it's something we really ought to praise and to reward in some way. But I think regulation's got to happen at multiple levels, for example. So, if you just take the space we're in, today vehicles in Europe, they go through a process called type approval. And once you've got a type approval in one EU state, you can basically sell that vehicle in every EU state. And it's an aggregation of functional safety testing of all the components that adds up to say, okay, we're going to test the whole car now. Once we've got type approval, you can ship that car in the markets, and we're done. So that is clearly inadequate for self-driving, because the day after you type approve a very, very complex piece of software, suddenly there's new skateboards and hoverboards and people wearing completely different clothes and new road signs and and different buildings and reflective surfaces, and you can imagine that the system that worked on the day you ran that millions of lines of code through a sort of a regression test suite and it passed, it's not going to pass the next day or the next day. And you start then to train the software. It's now completely different software. It's got different behaviors and everything. So you can sort of see that we need to really update the way we think about this, and it needs a lot of thought applied at a regulatory level, and it's not a blunt instrument. It's more like a surgeon's scalpel that's got to be applied. And then at the city level, I think at a city level, it can definitely be, there can be regulation to say we're not going to have a monopoly. There's going to be 2 or 3 licenses we're going to offer per city. So we definitely want more than one vendor per city. Things like curb stopping rights. How long can you stop at a curb for before you're blocking the road? And are you going to pay for all them? And are you going to pay road pricing? And what if you only carry one person per car all the time? We're going to want to regulate that you've got to achieve a certain seat occupancy and so on. So there's lots and lots of things that can happen at a city level. So getting the right level of regulation, I think, is important, and having intelligence at the right level. So it's a complicated business, I think.
There's a question on Slido which implies that we might be heading in a protectionist direction if we want to build walls around our industries. I think we're quite far from there, as we sketched out at the beginning, especially in the digital race, which is more binary between the US and China. But I would welcome your thoughts on that. And I think there is a question from a gentleman in the audience. Yes.
Okay, yes. Good morning, and thanks for the interesting discussion. Yeah, I have a question regarding the funding. You were mentioning that as one of the critical, the obstacles actually that prevents firms to grow. So when you look at the small firms, the different stages of development, from the business angels to venture capital back and so on, up to access to public markets, do you have any sense of in what phase now? Where are we seeing the biggest problem in what phase of development the funding is where it's breaking up, or you see a funding gap across the supply chain?
I don't think it's early stage. There's a massive conveyor belt of startup companies being created with all sorts of tax incentives that make that feasible and possible to do. It's definitely at the phase that the kind of deep tech type things that we're trying to do, where you literally have to go and raise $50 to several $100 million worth of capital. You're talking to venture firms, and their entire fund is 200 million. So that means that the maximum concentration they can have is, say, 20 in your company over its life, which means the first check is like 7 to 10. So it's way short of what's needed, and that's the gap. It's mega venture is what's missing, actually.
Well, I fully agree with Stan, but I think we have also another aspect of the scale-up problem. One aspect is the funding, but when I mentioned the fact that European corporations or public agencies are not buying products from those companies, that actually prevents them to have access to markets. That is why they also move elsewhere, because in the US, those established companies are much more keen and able to experiment. Governments do proof of concept with startup companies. Everybody benefits. In Europe, we don't have this mindset yet. So I think one of the problems is, yes, we lack critical mass of scale-up funds in Europe, but the second one is that we actually don't offer them a market to sell their products. And I think this also has to change.
Any other questions from the floor? Well, before we hear from Katya, I may want to finish with a question about the choice of technological developments, because when when Adam spoke earlier in the morning about picking lottery tickets, the obvious question which emerges is, how detailed these lottery tickets should be. Are we to think more about broad technological developments? And if so, what are those? Or should we necessarily get much more specific, given that the competition is often in the more defined, narrow areas? What would be your take? I mean, how do we go about becoming more strategic about technological development, basically?
Well, I think we need to broaden kind of the range of instruments for the innovation. And one thing that I think is really lacking is, I'd call it directed technical change almost. We look forward and we see problems coming our way. We see problems with aging society. We see problems in mobility. We see problems in climates. And one possibly good thing would be for governments now to promise 20 years from now that there will be a market for something, and promise that they will 20 years from now choose the best technology that then becomes available. You'll see how much opting in will happen today from venture firms and others if they know already that the market uncertainty is gone and all they're left with is the technological uncertainty. That's what they like to deal with. What they don't like to deal with is not knowing if there's going to be a European market. So I think policymakers could, in a sense, for some of these areas, point to a market 15, 20 years from now, but also ensure now that the money will be there then, possibly by starting to fund it and have bonds that will deliver that fund 20 years from now.
Perfect. Let's now hear from Katya Vladislavleva, who is CEO and Chief Data Scientist at DataStories. I mean, she will tell us more about what DataStories is, but it's a scalable analytics platform. So just like in Artur's presentation, give us a taste of business dynamism, the changing business models that you observe and you're part of.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here. I had a couple of visuals for you. So I'm Katya Vladislavleva. I'm CEO of DataStories. I founded this company in 2011 in Belgium. If IMEC is a crown jewel of Belgium and Europe, then we are probably a sand grain, which, despite all the odds, is still showing that we can become globally competitive as a very small business in Belgium, in Turnhout, not even a big city. So the gap that we have identified when I was working on my second doctorate at the Dow chemical company, we saw that this big multinational companies, and since then we worked with similar companies like Dow and SABIC and Unilever and Procter & Gamble, they all have the best analytics tools the money could buy, but still struggling with how to make sense of their data and how to use the tools. So we created DataStories. And for us, the name is very important. I always say technology has changed everything, but not the human nature. We humans, we talk to each other through stories. We don't talk to each other through machine learning algorithms or AI algorithms. So if anything that we build, innovation, will ever need to fly, it must be served in terms of stories and people, domain experts and business users, and not really data scientists and mathematicians like us. Need to own and internalize the insights. So DataStories is a name. It's very important for us. We're a small company, a team of 20 people in Turnhout. We did it the slow way since 2011, so we're already 8 years in the making. Bootstrapping, first doing services, investing into product. Our product became commercial only in 2017. We started selling it. We are, I think now I feel the fact that we are small, a small business is actually working at our advantage. There is a strong competitive advantage that we have built a unique expertise in the fields of material science, performance chemicals, life sciences, and advanced machinery. Very happy to share that we have been recognized globally now by Gartner as cool vendors in analytics. There were 4 vendors selected this year, and we are the only European company there. So what we have is the unique self-service analytics platform that is truly can be used by business experts to drive decisions based on the data which is collected. A very complex slide. The point I want to make is that we are small. Our funding, we only accepted the funding end of 2017, really modest, like 10 to 100 times smaller than the other companies who have been called analytics disruptors of the new wave. So there is SAP, which is European, Click, so all huge companies, and us DataStories. The rest is richly backed up, big startups. So what is the challenge, as I mentioned? Collaboration. We need to enable businesses to do data-driven innovation. We need to do it together. The domain experts must do it themselves. So that's why AI that we are delivering must be explainable and internalizable. So that's why for us the question why is very important. Our mission is potentially different from others, at least in the boldness of it. We exist for one reason, to show to the industry that AI does bring quick ROIs of less than 2 quarters and substantial cost reductions. So the business question for us is so important that we will never start even a project if the company or customer did not formulate the business need. And for industry, so this is just one example of what our customers could get from us, just so you can feel the difference. Instead of saying how cool AI is, we come and we ask a question. Would you like, as a laundry care or home care manufacturer, lower the cost? Now, with all the chemical formulations, we need to go bio. Bio ingredients are super expensive. You need to comply with regulatory pressures, especially in Europe. Would you like to lower the cost of your products by putting less ingredients there, without compromising on performance, and lower it by 8 to 10%. And this message resonates. We can validate proof of value projects within 30 days from the first day we start working in it to a validated formulation really in a lab, fully validated by the experts. So this is the business value. And maybe the most important things in my perspective for the industry, but also for Europe, there should be only we believe three goals that make sense to do AI for. Can I grow my business with it? Can I increase profitability? Or can I address uncertainty in my business? And nothing else matters, because then it becomes an intellectual, probably an ivory tower of doing AI for the purpose of AI. Why? So there are so many things in my business. It's a complex system. There are so many knobs that we can turn. We have limited resources. We have limited time. What should we change to achieve the targets that we want? Or how can we address the uncertainty that some things are happening in our process? We have no idea why. So if AI is the answer, so what are the questions? And we say that if we can, so these are all the 4 questions that you can ask, then you can apply data-driven innovation and machine learning in an explainable way. How everything, so in 4 questions are how everything from the things that we are measuring, all the factors and variables, how are they related to each other? First question. And how can I be sure? Is it just correlation or causation? What can I change? What are the factors that impact my performance targets? Be it European competitiveness or profitability or added value or customer life cycle or just performance of my products. What should I change and by how much exactly in my process of business to achieve the KPIs that I want, and whether it's possible at all? And what are exceptions to the rule that I need to call my team and go and eyeball and do it in detail manually? I'm very happy to also share that despite, so it's not only industry that is benefiting from AI, but we have some successful applications in policy making. And I think at this point, I'm really honored to share. So Malte Lohan, who is Director-General of Orgalim, the Federal Association of High Technology Industries, and Ivo Kombuchen, Director-General of European Association of Employers, have spoken highly about using AI and using AI in an explainable way to understand, to build forward-looking, predictive insights about what impacts their important performance targets, like profitability or productivity, which is added value per employee, or other things. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm going to be staying there for your questions. Good luck to us.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much, Katya. That was a very powerful example of the promise that AI brings. And going back to our set of questions from the beginning. Is technology going to lead to productivity improvements? Well, what we have just heard, I think, suggests the answer that definitely yes. I mean, it would be highly surprising if it doesn't. I mean, that's the conclusion one would draw. And now I'm looking at Veronica, especially that among the Slido questions, there was one which I would like to address to you as well, namely, what's the role of industrial policy in enhancing productivity? And industrial policy has been very high on our agenda as of at least beginning of this year. In this reiteration, it has been high on our agenda before, but then it's back. So would you see a role for industrial policy also in boosting productivity? Veronica.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank really very warmly to all the participants to this panel, because I think it was really a fascinating panel, bringing a lot of ideas, also pointing to several policy challenges for the policymakers. But I think, one of the messages that came across to me throughout all three, well, two panels and also the keynote speakers, we need to do this together. So we need to do this together, meaning the European Commission, the EU level, member states, but also stakeholders. I think this is the process that we need to work through jointly. And of course, there are several issues. I will maybe start first, not by industrial policy, because that certainly, it's very closely now also on the radar screen in the European Commission, but again, working jointly with the industry here. But I will start by sketching a little bit what was brought up, as challenges for the regulators in my panel. Starting, of course, with also what came out earlier, that regulation needs to be agile. Are we agile in Europe? Not necessarily to the level that we are required right now. I've been working for 5 years in the council, so I went through different, policy, legislative processes. On average, I think it takes us 2 years probably to get things through. So here, I'm sure we would need to adapt, find also ways to better address, in appropriate speed, I would say, the challenges. Then also, what Eric, you said at the beginning, that the current regulation no longer suffice. So we have a challenge here, which is brought by the new technology. You pointed to the data, the role of data. That's one of the angles. I'm sure if we dig a little bit more, we can find others. But here, certainly, that would require a certain reflection, also jumping right, quickly. Maybe here it's not a recipe, but certainly we need to have that in mind when we are coming up with new regulatory proposals. Then what you said, Stan, is that expertise in regulation. Here, I think we are doing a little bit better than we did 10, 20 years ago. We tend now to have also experts in the room when we are looking in the challenges. Surely we can still look into that, but the tendency, at least, and the direction is there. Also mentioned, I think, was that there is, I think, Eric, you said that in one of your final remarks, it's important to have a promise for market. I think I can give you one example of that, because I was the director for carbon markets, European carbon markets before. So I think here, typically, Europe made an effort to be brave already in 2005 and give a market perspective for low carbon technologies. Although I think we could, we see some movements, but not yet to the level that I think we would all like to see. Surely, maybe more to come. But now, diving more into this, challenge of smart policies for fresh business dynamism. So what are we confronted here with is, of course, first, as I said, these new technologies are transforming the ways business is done. That was very clearly, I think, put on the table by Stan, by Eric, by Katya. Also, these new technologies are transforming, in a way, competition. that's another challenge, which I'll come back to try to explain how we are, looking at that. And then also, not so much in this panel, but it was mentioned earlier on, labor markets and product markets. So this, of course, puts all, the strains on the policy. Now, what do we do here in Europe? I mean, the European semester has been mentioned prominently since the beginning. And just last week, few colleagues are here in the room. We had long discussions about the European semester recommendations. Surely, I think listening to Adam at the beginning, I think, the priorities you mentioned, we have them there. Maybe we are not good in communicating. This can be, one of the things we should look into this. But in this year's European semester, we had a special emphasis on investments in the innovation, investments in infrastructure, investments in human capital. So this has been one of the focus, which I think is certainly pointing to the right direction. The other one is skills. A lot of discussions, policy discussions in Europe. What is the set of skills that we need for the future economy? Is it only digital skills? Is it maybe skills for digital economy? It's certainly a lot about upskilling, reskilling, and also fitting the profiles for the future labor market. And here we have, beyond the European semester, also joint initiatives with member states, one called New Skills, where we are looking into relevance and also the quality of skills in terms of adequacy for the future markets. So that's one thing. And then we have European Social Fund, which also financially helps the effort in member states. This is, of course, a long-term or, rather things that we cannot do in one semester vintage, but these are the focuses that I can project to you what we have in relation to the skills and labor market. Now on competition, I think it has been a lot, of focus that ensuring the effective competition policy is critical. And here is certainly, I think Europe is strong. And we need to continue to be strong. We need to avoid this excessive market power in new industries specifically. I think we have these challenges. Eric, you pointed to that, and it was also pointed at the beginning, that new industries are characterized by this, winner-takes-all approach, and also foreclosures were mentioned. So it's critically important to get this right. What are we doing in Europe? Our colleagues in DG Competition are certainly looking in these new dimensions. They established a panel of experts who is looking into this, competition framework in the EU, whether it suits or not for the future challenges. Overall, what the experts are saying is that, we have the framework which is sound and flexible enough. However, it would need to be adjusted in certain, in terms of certain concepts, methodologies, or, enforcement. But I think as a basis, we are in a good track. Of course, I don't want to sound complacent. There are issues. And listening to Eric, I'm sure, that would give us a lot of reflections. But I think the starting point and the direction is set. I'm not going to go into innovation because I think Romain was really very capably explaining that. But maybe just a few words also on the, business dynamism and also the challenges we face there. In Europe, the churn, the rate of exiting and entering of new firms was historically low, which is not something to be proud, but we have been working on that for some time now. Now, have we done a lot? I think we have done quite a lot, but certainly not enough. If you look also in the European semester specific country recommendations, it's a lot about product market, services market. What is the implementation rate there? Certainly, I don't want to, sound here someone but still we have a quite low rate of improvements, specifically in terms of, in the field of competition of services. So there we have a number of member states now, I think around 10, having this recommendation, still working on it. Now we are trying to set in place also tools that would support member states' effort. The Commission proposed recently the reform delivery tool. We have the technical assistance support that can support member states in that effort. But altogether, it's not this easy. I think, we'll try, Adam, your advice, not to call these structural reforms. We will talk about dynamism, but still, I think it's maybe more than, communication. Certainly, I think it's a big part of communication there as well. Another 2 points is the market fragmentation which we face here in Europe for businesses. I think several of you pointed to that. Now, in financial markets, there is a capital market union process ongoing where we had a number of legislative acts. I'm not going to go through them. Majority of them are adopted. Iliyana, they're adopted, but of course, it takes time now to put this in practice and to transpose this legislation into national legislation. And that's what will make the market then available. We hope also trigger better use of non-banking support for new, innovative young firms. Then another important, I think, support that was mentioned that was needed is really to scaling up. Here, Iliyana, you were very strong in explaining what we already have. I think what is also important to mention is, of course, this financial support venture fund. We have now Venture EU, for example, the Invest EU coming up with 600 billion of investment, money available. We would like to penetrate better in this cooperation with the private sector, and that's one of the ambitions. But beyond that, what we think is also important, these young new companies are encouraged to enter, but have a possibility to exit, the market. So there we had also a relatively new legislation related to the insolvency and encouraging this, entrepreneurship culture, which I think is very important. Now, to finish off, just, to share a few thoughts on the innovation and technological diffusion. Plenty of evidence, I think, in several panels so far. And here, really, Stan, you said it very well. We have ideas here in Europe, so technology, but this entrepreneurship is lacking. So application then goes in other continents, maybe, in where these companies find better ecosystem to thrive, to grow, to start. So here, we know we have a challenge. We try to come up with our best, possible approach. One of them is this European Innovation Council, which was mentioned a couple of times. But also, for example, with finding other financing support like Escalar, InvestEU. So hopefully we will make progress there as well. I will maybe finish off with a sentence that Adam, you started with. Europe has opportunity to do this right. And I hope, Katya, my story convinced you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Veronica. This was absolutely brilliant. I don't know who had the idea of asking Veronica, Roman, and then Eric to do the policy takeaways, but this was a brilliant idea. We have already, no, I don't think so. I think it was Natasha, but we have the whole package now ready-made. This was brilliant. We now have, and I will say that before I ask you to thank the speakers, we now have an hour, we're exactly on time, an hour for lunch. There's a beautiful room upstairs where we can enjoy also a bit of the sunshine. And when we come back at 2 o'clock sharp, Ann Mettler, the head of EPSC, will chair an exciting panel on digitalization. with Deborah and with some of the leading companies in the field like SAP and Ørsted and also a startup. So we will look at how digitalization that Derek identified right at the outset as one of the key issues for raising productivity, how we're doing in getting to more refined, more sophisticated digital tools. So let's spend an hour together having lunch, but before we do that, please join me in giving our speakers a warm round of applause.